October is going to go at breakneck pace, with little time in between huge La Liga matches and those Champions League, fate-defining Champions League matchups in the group stage. Such is the case when there's a Winter World Cup. While Xavi did pick up his 18th straight unbeaten away result against Mallorca, beating Zidane's record with the most unbeaten results to start a La Liga coaching tenure, on the road at least. Unfortunately, the record is still in La Liga, and Barcelona are going to need a result in Italy to keep their Champions League campaign on track. After that game against Mallorca, I totally understand why culés might be coming into this matchup with Inter with a bit of pessimism, especially with all those injuries and absences and that ugly game that Barça did play on the road against Mallorca. Fortunately, I can tell you that Inter Milan fans aren't coming into this game with any more confidence, having suffered a loss to Roma on the exact same day that Barça got by Mallorca. So instead of dwelling on Barça today, we will talk about what Xavi might do at the end of this, but instead, we're going to give our focus to the team that Barcelona are most likely facing off for second place in the group with. That means a ticket to the Champions League knockout, and that means the opponent is Inter Milan. So today we're going to talk about Inter Milan's manager, possible formation, as well as almost any player that might play a key role in a result for Inter Milan against Barcelona. And we do begin by talking about Inter's manager, and that is Simone Inzaghi, brother of the famous Italian striker Filippo Inzaghi, who fans my age will remember at Juve and AC Milan in the late 90s and 2000s. Simone, meanwhile, is probably best remembered for his days at Lazio during the same period, and also as a striker. But he's a manager now, having managed Lazio from 2016 to 2021, and some of their more successful seasons of late, winning the Supercoppa Italiana twice and the Coppa Italia once, also reaching the Champions League in 2020-21 for the first time since 2008. That all earned him a move to Inter Milan in June of 2021, so last summer. Last season he managed to win the Supercoppa Italiana and the Coppa Italia, beating Juve twice in extra time to win the trophies. Inter Milan also finished last season second in the table, just behind AC Milan, and they did finish with the best attacking record with 84 goals for. For a manager that's been around the top flight of Italian football for 6 years now, it's surprising to me that you don't hear more about him outside of Italy. And maybe one of those reasons is because there's not a lot of question marks around Inzaghi. He just goes out and manages and does his job. And it is interesting to me, too, that managers seem in today's day and age to be either known as player managers or these great tacticians. And it seems to me, just from what I've heard from Inter Milan fans, that Inzaghi is like 65% manager of a player and like 35% tactician. That's not to knock his tactical expertise. It wins games, and it's not dogmatic either. He is willing to change things up to get results, something he's been able to do over the last 6 years to some good effect as a manager. What you do need to know about his tactics starts with his formation choice, though. It's a 3-5-2 and a 5-3-2 out of possession. His team can and will play with the ball, and we'll get into that nuance in a second. Since he does play in a 3-5-2, it is a bit of a challenge to talk about defenders and midfielders and forwards because that formation is so fluid. So instead, I think we're going to talk about some of the things that Inter want to do to succeed against Barcelona, and that'll probably highlight the important players along the way. When talking about the men on the field, we have to begin with Lautaro Martinez, who might not be entirely fit for this match, but if he can go, he's still going to be the one who all the bright lights are on. He leads the team with 3 goals, which for culés, they're a bit spoiled by Lewandowski, but 3 goals is just fine to lead a team right now that has a bit of balance in their attack. But Lautaro is having a good season now at 25, continuing to refine his game to make his team better, not just himself. This season he can be spotted making near-post runs, looking for headers to get himself to knock to the back post, and on set pieces he's particularly dangerous for this because Hakan Çalhanoğlu is a terrific set-piece specialist. Çalhanoğlu being confident with a long shot also opens up lanes for Lautaro, who has more first-time shots on goal than anyone else in Europe's top 5 leagues this season. He's been fantastic, putting himself in great spots. Next to him won't be Romelu Lukaku, who is out with injury. Instead, it'll most likely be Edin Dzeko, who with his size and experience can be a bit of a pest at this point. He did have a goal called offside against Roma over the weekend, and the game kind of showcased what he still is. He's faster from point A to B than I think most opponents realize, but he's more than willing just to kind of take up space in the middle there, let things happen around him, and be prepared in the box to strike. So in the case of Martinez and Dzeko, and some of what I told you about the first touches of Lautaro Martinez, and the way that Dzeko, we know he likes to play, I think you've started to realize that those forwards for Inter Milan, they need service to survive. And this is actually where I think that Barcelona could have some kind of a slight advantage, in that midfield. The Inter midfield will most likely consist of Nicola Barella and Çalhanoğlu, and the third, well, that's a question we'll get to soon. But the wingbacks are just as essential to this system as the midfielders, and these 5 obviously define games. Inter likes to overload their right side. A former right back, now turned right wing back in Denzel Dumfries, well, he's going to be the key man. He's quick, he gets out wide, and he also has the ability to make up space and defend and get back in that spot on the same lane. And as they're building up play, he'll stay wide, that being Dumfries. Barella supports, and Çalhanoğlu is the left interior, but also has the clearance to roam when necessary. Barella will look for long balls out wide to Dumfries when the opponent gets stretched, and Barella comes back to receive the ball from the center backs. On the left will likely be Federico Di Marco, who is a fine player, but one that Dembélé should look to attack. Robin Gosens may be good to go there as well, but since they both played together this season a few times, it could be Gosens as a tucked-in left interior and Di Marco outside of him. These little selection nuances are things for Xavi to ponder. And I don't want to downplay Di Marco either. He isn't a household name outside of Italy, but he did just score that 1 goal against Roma, and he does put the ball in the back of the net in pretty different ways coming off that wing. If it's not Gosens as that third midfielder, it also won't be Marcelo Brozovic, who's out injured for this game and the one next week too. The real question will be, does Inzaghi trust 20-year-old holding midfielder Christian Aslani, who just started his first match for Inter against Roma, in the other midfield spot next to Barella and Çalhanoğlu? On paper, he makes the most sense to contend with Barca's suspected midfield trio of Pedri, Gavi, and Bussi. But Aslani would immediately become the player that Barca would need to pick on. Get Dembélé and Rafinha inverting at him as much as possible and go from there. Inzaghi has options for that third midfield spot, but just like Barca and right back, I think there actually are right answers and wrong answers, and sitting here, I'm not sure what the right answers are, but you and I both know that there are wrong answers. And I think the coaches that get some of those really important 50-50 positions right are going to be the ones to come out with more success and maybe some kind of result from this game. Off the bench, or maybe potentially starters, Joaquin Correa is the forward, the winger, and he's kind of curious with Inter. I'm not sure where he necessarily fits. Yes, the answer is on the wing, but he doesn't really do a lot of defending. But when Inter are going for it, Correa is the option. He's a winger by trade, and he's really, really fast. That's kind of what you need to know. Hendrik Mkhitaryan is a midfield option off the bench. Some creativity, yes, but certainly Mkhitaryan is not the player that you might remember from, even going back to his Shakhtar Donetsk days, or most likely his Dortmund days, or even his more recent Roma days. Now to talk about Inter's press and the way they want to go about that part of the game, we generally have to focus on the back line. It's not a high-octane press, but the goal seems to be to put just enough pressure on the opposing either center backs or full backs to bomb the ball forward looking for a forward. At that point, Milan Skriniar will step forward to try to win that 50-50, knowing that the other center backs are there to support him. And Skriniar does win a ton of those 50-50s without fouling the forward, which keeps Inter on the front foot. Skriniar may be the big name, but maybe 23-year-old Alessandro Bastoni should be. He's actually been much more reserved this season, not going forward as much while playing as the left center back in the back three. Like the midfield, I can lock in Skriniar and Bastoni as definitely 2 of the 3 starters. Then for the last spot, that's where there's a little bit of a question, but I think less of a question than there is in the midfield. For the back line, in that game against Roma, we just saw 34-year-old Francisco Acerbi, and he actually played in the middle of that back line. But more likely, with Stefan de Vrij the other option, I'm assuming he'll be the one stepping back into the starting lineup for Acerbi, and you're going to see a back three of Skriniar and Bastoni with de Vrij. Maybe in the middle, it could be Skriniar in the middle. Again, these little nuances and wrinkles that could decide this match. One of the criticisms against Inter Milan this season is they are lacking some dynamism in that midfield. I told you about the set piece abilities that they have, as well as the long balls and ways that they can kind of break down an opponent very methodically, building up from the back. But again, it's those little blinks of an eye, those moments where Barcelona should be able to shut them down. If you don't allow Inter to hit you the way they want to, that being slow and methodically, I'm not sure what they can do on the counter, which in this case, because of the way that Barcelona have been playing this year, might actually support the Catalans. Because of the way that Inter Milan play, they put a lot of pressure on their midfielders to be those key men to unlock the opposition with just one ball. So make sure you close down those passing lanes, and you're definitely going to have some success on your press. And I think that's going to be my key matchup, if you will. It's the Barcelona press against Inter Milan. And it's one of those weird things where Barcelona are on the road, but we always expect Barca to have more possession. But in this kind of game, the way Inter want to play, that may not be the case. And I'm just telling you, that might be okay. In net, Andre Onana, the former La Masia goalkeeper and Ajax goalkeeper, is the player that Kool-Aids may know, but the starter, and the guy you probably should know if you've watched any football in Italy over the last, 10 plus years, the ageless, and I guess ageless, but he is 38-year-old Samir Andanovic. Andanovic is a regular starter, and I expect him to bring that experience between the posts for this one. Now let's talk about the stakes of this match. It's Inter this week on the road in Italy, and then it's at the Spotify Camp Nou next week. I've been saying it on the podcast, and I'll say it again here. Barcelona need to get 4 points. I know 2 wins. That'll put everybody at ease. And a win in Italy, that'll certainly calm all the nerves. And I think that'll make the following week's preparations a lot easier too. Remember, Barcelona are playing basically every 3 or 4 days. So very little time to prepare for their next match. 4 points is the way that Barcelona advance in the Champions League. A draw in Italy, and it has to be a win at the Spotify Camp Nou. And this is the way the Champions League goes. You have just 6 matches. Bayern Munich is going to be the top of the table. Victoria Pilsen is going to be far behind. And that means it's the 2 in the middle. It's Barcelona, it's Inter Milan fighting out for that final spot. So you have to beat the team right in front of you. You have to beat your rival. And these 2 games decide it all. So finally, how will Xavi handle everything that we discussed? We already know that there's no Araujo, no Koundé, no Bellerin. And by the time this is out, we'll have a better idea or a clearer idea that there's likely no Frenkie de Jong and no Memphis Depay. Inter Milan are also missing players, and looking at these 2 squads side by side, going toe-to-toe, on paper, there's no reason why Culés cannot feel confident that their team is just as good or better than what Inter Milan are going to be putting out there. A lot of it comes down to the players who aren't injured too. For Barcelona, they've got a pretty healthy midfield and forward line. And if you win those 2 battles in a game, you likely have won the game. So there'll be zero surprise if we see Dembélé, Lewandowski, and Rafinha up top. Of course, that midfield trio, Pedri got a break against Mallorca, so of course that midfield trio is going to be Pedri, Gavi, and Busquets. I think Kessier's unfortunate performance against Mallorca, also part of that equation. To make it easy, Frenkie de Jong's injury. Again, I've got nothing to do in that midfield. And along that back line, I think we're going to see Alonso at left back, just like we saw against Bayern Munich. Of course, Christensen has played his way into the starting role. And I think we're also going to see Garcia and Piqué, but with those 2 as the center backs and Christensen on the right. Now hear me out on this. I know we haven't seen it just yet, and it's interesting too that in the preseason, Christensen was the one center back that exclusively played as a center back and did not go out wide at all. And I know it also seems nuts because Balde just played on the right side against Mallorca, and Sergio Roberto might be fully fit. But I think because of Edin Dzeko, that's why I think Piqué gets the nod instead of Roberto. But as I say that, I'm not sure I have the full answer either because those wingbacks are going to be a problem, especially for Eric Garcia. We've seen what happens when opponents are able to draw him out to the wing. So maybe we could even see Alonso, Piqué, Christensen, and Sergio Roberto if he's healthy. That would make sense to me as well, again, just to deal with those wingbacks that Inter Milan have out wide. And of course, an informed Ter Stegen will be in net, but you already knew that. The right back position and that back line in totality is going to be a talking point for a few weeks now. And the way that Xavi goes in this one could tell us a lot about the ways that he's going to try to solve the same problem coming up in El Clasico against Real Madrid if Jules Koundé isn't healthy. Still, Barcelona has all the tools to take 4 points against Inter Milan for the next 2 weeks. Heck, take all 6. Barcelona are leading the Liga at the moment. They should be flying high and have the confidence to take care of business in the Champions League as well. So make sure to keep your eyes and ears peeled for all the post-match reactions. Of course, there'll be a podcast and a match review. And until then, as always, Forza Barça.